Hi, I'm Dan McDermott. Welcome, and thanks for checking us out. Live from Lynchburg, Virginia, this is the McDermott Report. Our guest is computer expert and race car driver Bob Harman. Coming up on today's show, the latest news happening right now. Congressman Ron Paul talks about Afghanistan, China, Rick Perry, and the Tea Party. Should prisoners have the right to vote? A Rockville news site abandons its home on the web to publish exclusively on Facebook. Is that a good idea? Should the FTC be targeting Google? What is a monopoly really? Are homegrown vegetables safer? Are people being scammed at farmers markets? Plus, 2 rants: the Targets, Radio Shack, and the Wall Street Journal. We welcome your calls. The number is 818-688-6625. This is the McDermott Report. We appreciate you joining us today. I'm Dan McDermott. My guest is Bob Harman. Bob, how you doing?
Great, Dan.
Bob is my brother-in-law. He's in Manassas, Virginia, and he is a race car driver. So we're going to talk, as we said in the intro, Ron Paul. We have a clip from ABC News, and we're going to be discussing his views on a number of things. We're going to discuss should prisoners vote, and a website that is on Facebook and a bunch of other things. But first of all, Bob, real quick, tell us a little bit about yourself. You are a computer expert and a race car driver and a husband of my sister.
That's correct, Dan. I actually work for Lockheed Martin, and I've spent my entire career in the military computer area, and I currently run a program where we're upgrading the submarine fleet of another U.S. ally.
Okay, and Bob and I, he helped me one year. We were twice, I think. We did a computer camp.
Twice, right? Yeah, somewhere
twice. It was
back in the 80s, probably.
Yeah, I was young, tall, and skinny.
90s,
the good old days.
90s, yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, let's do this Ron Paul thing here, and let's see what he had to say. It's a really interesting interview. I like Ron Paul. I don't agree with everything he says. I don't really understand everything he says, but he's going to talk about a number of things, and so let's check out what Ron Paul has to say. Here we go.
Congressman Paul, welcome to Top Line. So, big speech by the president tonight. Afghanistan, you've been a critic of this war for a very long time. What do you need to hear from the president tonight?
He's coming home, but not tokenly. I don't want to hear that he's going to bring 5,000 troops home or 10,000 troops. We need to have a significant change in foreign policy, which means that all the troops come home and turn that country back over to the Afghans and let them deal with it.
So all the troops come home now, today.
Sure. Well, I mean, you can't do it in 24 hours, but you can make the announcement and you can start the withdrawal from that country because there's nothing for us to be gained.
Well, what about the criticism from some Republicans, including one of your opponents, Tim Pawlenty, saying he's worried that what the Republicans are doing when they make statements like this, they're drifting towards isolationism?
Well, I think they don't know the definition of isolationism. Isolationism is something that the protectionists want. They want to close borders for people coming in, and they want to close trade. And I have no desire to do that at all because I'm a free trader and I want as much travel and communication with other countries as possible. And this is what the founders advised. We were never given the authority to be the policemen of the world.
But if we pull out of Afghanistan, you're not concerned that the terrorists take over, that there's a greater terrorist threat?
Sure, I'm concerned, but I think we'll have less danger to us if we don't occupy foreign countries, because that's the top motivation for the desire to come here and kill Americans, is because we've invaded their land. They see us as wanting to take their natural resources, and that's what they get angry about. And we put military bases on their land. The best way to think about this is, what if another country did that to us? Every American would be together. If the Chinese did to us what we do to other countries, no American would say, oh, that's okay, they're nice people, maybe we can learn their culture and their religion. It would be insane. And yet we go and think that we are promoting the goodness of America. The only way you can promote and spread the goodness of America is to set a good example and do it through persuasion.
All right, so we're also involved in places like Libya, we're still in Iraq, we're, Yemen, all these places. What is the Ron Paul doctrine then in dealing with what's clearly a threat from many of these countries?
Well, it's a threat because we're there.
So if we weren't there, though,
over time we would have less threat and we would save the money because we can't afford it. So we're setting ourselves up for a brutal economic collapse because this is a significant amount of money. We spend $1 trillion a year maintaining our empire. So yes, we should come from all those areas. There's no authority. We've been fighting war since World War II. Technically in an unconstitutional fashion. We never declare war anymore and the wars linger. And that's what my argument has been. If you want to fight a war, you declare it. This is the case I made when they were preparing to go into Iraq. And I made them vote in the committee for a war resolution. Nobody voted for it, including myself. But I claim that if there is a danger to the people and our security, the Congress should represent the people and vote for it, and everybody should be with us. We should go and win the war. But no, they don't want to assume that responsibility. They want to defer to the executive branch, let the executive branch do whatever they want. There's no victories, and it never ends.
Do you think our relationship with China over the last 2 years, did it get stronger, weaker? Are we in a better position, worse position than we were when Obama took office?
I would defer to saying it's probably been pretty neutral. I don't think it's deteriorated because things are so much better than what I remember in high school. We were fighting the Chinese and the Koreans, and one of my teachers was sent to Korea and never came back. So that had an impact on me. So it's so much better. Yeah. I think Nixon did a lot of terrible things. I always criticize him about closing the gold bin and all these things. But he opened up the door to China. I think we're much better off talking to the Chinese and trading with the Chinese, and they have an interest in staying peaceful with us as we have an interest on them, even though we have our differences on some of the trade and why do our companies go to China. And in some ways they embarrass us because they're more capitalistic than we are. Right. It's easier for our businesses to go to China than it is to stay here. That aggravates me, but I blame ourselves for that.
All right, let's talk about one other person, your home state governor, Rick Perry, thinking about getting in. Want to give us an assessment of the governor?
Well, you know, I haven't been involved in state politics. I know that one of our Tea Party candidates ran without any money against him, got 20% of the vote last time.
So you don't think he's Tea Party enough?
Oh, well, no, I never put him in that category, but I put him in the category of being very smart.
Do you think
he's captured a lot of that sentiment, you know, when he threw out terms, well, we have to protect our right to secession, and, you know, it always fed a little fodder, you know, to the Tea Party people. So he's pretty smart. And I think he would always come that way. So he's into politics pretty well, and he would be a formidable candidate.
Can he take credit for Texas's economy? It's been doing very well over the last decade, as you know.
Well, no, I think the conditions of Texas over the many decades has been healthier for the economy. It's a right to work state. You know, he didn't do that, but he would support that. We don't have an income tax. We do have high property taxes, but the environment there is good. Those people that lose their jobs in the Midwest and the Northeast, they come to Texas. We're getting 4 new congressional seats. In my own district. Caterpillar is opening a new plant, and so some of the states have a healthier environment than the other states. But even Texas, if we don't continue to do that, these jobs are going to still go overseas. So Texas has had a good environment for the business community.
Congressman Ron Paul, the Republican from Texas, Republican presidential candidate. Appreciate you being here on Top Line. Thanks.
All right, and that is Ron Paul of Texas discussing a number of things: Afghanistan, China, Rick Perry. So, Bob, what are your thoughts first of all on Afghanistan? Should we be there?
Well, I think unfortunately that decision was made a long time ago, and the problem I see with just picking up and leaving Afghanistan, the Taliban and Al Qaeda are waiting us out. I mean, those people are used to waiting for a long time for everything. So, the moment we leave there, the Taliban take back over. I guarantee that'll happen. And Al Qaeda will set up shop in there because there's nobody to stop them. I think same thing will happen in Libya. I mean, everyone talks about getting rid of Gaddafi, but what's going to be the future then? We don't even know who the protesters are and what they believe. So they take over the country, and how does that potentially not just another radical Islamic state at that point?
I hear you. My thinking is that the Taliban and those guys are going to take over anyway, and that we're just sort of prolonging that at a tremendous human and financial cost. and I think I guess we had to go in.
And if we just pick up and leave from Afghanistan, then all the soldiers who've died there will be for nothing. I mean, we have just wasted all those lives because the country will be exactly where it was 10 years ago.
That's true. That's also the argument that was used to prolong the Vietnam War.
Right, and that one was a little closer to home. I was of age to go back then, and I certainly wasn't in favor of going because I didn't know anything about Vietnam. I didn't have any basic grudge. The company had, or the country had, said this was the right thing we do. We have to go and help these people. Well, I don't know that all these other countries necessarily want our help.
That was one of Ron Paul's comments.
What the Taliban did in Afghanistan was horrible. The way they treated people, the type of justice that they meted out, the way they treat women. It's hard for an American to stand by and see that happen. But we either have to be there for decades, or we're just wasting our time.
Ron Paul in the interview, he said that we want to promote the good example of America. That's how we should do it, by setting a good example and not by intervening. He says he's not an isolationist, but largely he seems to be. I think we had to go into Afghanistan because they were harboring the terrorist bin Laden, and Iraq was obviously something that George Bush elected to do, and it turns out that there were no weapons of mass destruction. So, to quote the Secretary of Defense, outgoing Secretary of Defense Gates, he said that it was started on a false premise. And now we're in Libya. I think that. Do you think that a lot of folks are questioning our involvement in Libya? There was a vote in Congress to certify that Congress approved it, and it failed with folks from both parties, largely Republicans, but a bunch of Democrats. Do you think that if we killed Gaddafi, that sentiment would change on the Libya action?
No, I don't think so. Again, because I think they've seen what happens. We got rid of Saddam Hussein. What happened? The country fell apart, and without us being there, they would literally be worse off. I mean, I think a lot more people are dying there now, their own people, killed by others of their own people, than probably when Saddam Hussein was there. So even though he was a brutal dictator, I don't see the country as better off now with the corrupt government that they have running it.
Okay, and then on China, what are your thoughts? I'm sitting here with computers and all kinds of electronic gadgets, probably all of which were made in China. Even a lot of the Japanese products are now made in China. So, should we? What do you think? Is that fine? Should we be concerned?
I would personally be concerned. I mean, we can't just offshore all of our industry to another country who probably doesn't compete fairly in the world. I know there have been issues with their products. They don't have the same sort of safety standards, whatever. And I've actually had this. My mother happens to be a very strong union supporter, and she's very anti Walmart because they're non-union, and everything in Walmart comes from China. And well, everyone has the power to buy things made in the United States. Nobody has to buy Chinese goods. I maybe would be in favor of something where products are required to be labeled where they were made, but other than that, people have the free choice what to buy. So if they want the best price and they're goods from China, people vote with their pocketbooks, and that's what they tend to be buying. So we sort of do it to ourselves, I guess. If people don't want to purposely pay more for something because it was made in the United States, you can't turn around and then complain about American industry disappearing. So if China's not paying, and I'm not up to speed enough to know if they're like illegally dumping products here or whatever, but if they make products that are up to the standards of what can be sold here, and of course we had the problem with like drywall that they sold over here, which was basically giving off some sort of formaldehyde gas or something that was making people sick. Can't have that. So, but if their products are safe, people should vote with their pocketbook. They either want to pay the lower price, or they're willing to pay for American goods and pay more.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I voluntarily bought all these things, my cheaply made Chinese goods, and they seem to work pretty well. So, okay, great. That's Ron Paul. The next topic is a strange one. I saw this. This was an interview from Sky News, and the topic was, should prisoners be able to vote? Now, this is a British guy, but he mentions the United States and other countries, and in Scandinavia, which has a very low recidivism rate. And it just is an interesting thing, and I'll tell you why I find it interesting in just a moment. So let's check this out.
Well, with me here is Sean Atwood, who served time, in fact, in America. And you think the prisoners should have the vote. Why?
I think it's in the interest of society in the long run to rehabilitate prisoners. If you give them more responsibility in the running of society when they get released, and they are going to end up your neighbours and my neighbours when they do get released, they're likely to be better behaved.
But I think, the argument would be that, if you like, is looking ahead.
Yes.
That actually, when you're in prison, you're being punished.
Absolutely.
And that if you should lose your rights as a citizen, after all, you lose your liberty. So wouldn't it go with that your right to exercise your vote would go as well?
Well, then you get into the philosophical debate of whether prison is rehabilitation or punishment, and I think it should be rehabilitation.
But it is a loss of liberty, that's all I'm saying. So,
Yes.
you lose other rights. What I can't quite understand is why this right should be separated.
Well, I discussed this with John Hurst, who actually got the ruling in the Human Rights Court in Europe, and he said human rights are about protecting the most vulnerable members of society, and prisoners are a section of that group. So in that sense, it's a human right that should be allowed for prisoners.
But they have infringed other people's rights,
Yes.
either their physical rights or indeed their rights of property.
Yes.
And therefore a lot of people would take the view that, frankly, this isn't something where it's worth fighting for.
But isn't loss of liberty and being punished enough for a prisoner? Do we want to treat them harshly so that when they get back to society, they're enemies of society and they're not conforming to the way they want to conform as good citizens?
And you genuinely believe that if prisoners had the vote, it would help to reform them?
Well, look at the Scandinavian countries. Recidivism is the lowest in them. They have a more humane approach to prisoners, and the vote is allowed there. Look at America. You've got 1 in 100 adults in the prison system. The jail I was at had the highest rate of death in America and had intense conditions. It's got the highest crime rate in the country. So if we go with the Scandinavian approach, where they do allow the vote and they do treat the prisoners more humanely, it's proven to be in the interest in the long run of society.
The suggestion really that this is all a bit of a diversion and by the people who've taken up the cause, that they're much more important issues about prisoners' rights. I suspect you concede that.
I think it's paramount that prisoners are educated and given job skills, and then they would have a better chance to reintegrate into society. I couldn't agree with you more. But I think also giving them the right to vote is giving them an added responsibility, and they are more likely then to conform to the rules of that society if they're given the right to vote and participate in it. John Hurst, one of the things he pointed out was now the prisoners, when they're aggrieved, basically what they do is riot.
Yeah.
So, if they're given an alternative...
But it's fair to say, I wouldn't include you in that, but John Hurst is a pretty unsavoury character. He's a convicted murderer, he has racist opinions, and he appears to be doing this to make trouble rather than on the issue of principle, doesn't he?
I'm not defending anything to do with Mr. Hurst outside of the right to vote, and he's the gentleman that actually won that ruling in the European High Court.
But why do you think he brought it? Do you think he genuinely brought the action because he thought this was so important, or because he wanted to make trouble?
I don't know what his exact motivations are, but the bottom line is I think it is a move in the right direction to give prisoners more responsibilities so they can better reintegrate in society.
All right, that's great. That's an interesting topic, and I'll tell you, here are my thoughts. First of all, should Charles Manson be allowed to vote? No. But we were discussing a bill by the first person we watched, Congressman Ron Paul and Barney Frank, to decriminalize on a federal level marijuana. And it brings up a point. You have some folks who think it's... I'm using marijuana as an example, but it's basically a victimless crime. If some hippie goes in the woods and smokes a joint, who's he hurting? It's a morality legislation. And so what you have is you have a bunch of folks who have been charged with felony possession of marijuana, and they can't ever vote again. You have a whole bunch of felons in Virginia who can't vote, and some of them are serious traffic offenses or something, and it just goes on for the rest of their lives. And there's a process to petition to get your voting rights restored, but one can argue that that some folks who are former inmates 30 years ago, should they never ever again have any say in public discourse? Bob Harman, what do you think?
I'm curious who raised the issue. Is this an outcry of prisoners saying we want to vote, or is it just somebody who thinks that this is a right that's being deprived from these people once they get out? I mean, I would suspect the typical person, and I'm not talking about somebody who goes to prison because they maybe possess marijuana or something, but do you think most of the guys who were involved in crime voted before they went to prison? That's a good
point. And I think I'm not even going to discuss whether current prisoners should be voting. I'm just saying, I guess I'm taking this conversation forward to say, what about felons and what about people who were in prison a long time ago? Because there's a whole bunch of people who are convicted felons in Virginia and they can't own a gun, they can't get a job in most cases. That's a question. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? And they can never, ever, ever vote again. If they did something when they were 18, 19 years old or before them, but charged as an adult, then they still can never, ever vote and have any say in the future when they're 60 years old and have grandkids. I have some questions about whether that makes sense. But you have a great point that most of them wouldn't have voted anyway.
Now, if you're talking about somebody who made some mistake when they were young, they did one stupid thing in their life, I could see that if a period of time, so they say like, okay, if you stay out of prison for 20 years, you can petition to have your right to vote back, or maybe your right to own a gun if you were involved in nonviolent crimes. Anybody was involved in a violent crime, too bad they lose their rights, and it should be known beforehand. If you do this, this is the punishment. It shouldn't be subjective. Well, you may lose your rights or you may not lose your right to do things. This is the rules. You break them, here's what's going to happen. And I personally think we're a little soft on prisoners these days. Prison should be someplace you don't want to go to. Not someplace, okay, I go to prison, do my time, and I get out. It should be someplace you really, I would actually be for violent criminals or significant crimes that we go back to hard labor. It should not be someplace where you're watching TV, lifting weights, and basically whiling away the day doing nothing.
I think so. I guess
chain gang back together, lock them up, and get them out and get them working.
Maybe the Maricopa County Sheriff Joe approach.
Right.
With what does he have? Pink boxer shorts on him, and
yeah.
Oh.
I can't remember why, but I saw the explanation of why he did it, and it wasn't for the reasons that people attributed to. But it escapes me right now why he actually did that. But
I think it was so if they escaped.
People should not want. If you go to prison, it shouldn't be a great place to go to, and it should cause people to think twice. If I do this, I could go to prison. Prison's a bad place I don't want to go to. Maybe I won't commit this crime. And if knowing it's going to be hard labor, whatever, and you still decide that it's worth the risk to me to do this, even if I'm going to end up smashing rocks for 30 years every day. But if again, there could be a tiered level for if somebody is in prison for a nonviolent crime and they get out and they're clean for a period of years, I don't know if it'd be 10 or 20, whatever, I could see them petitioning to get their rights back. For those type of crimes, I don't think you ostracize people for the rest of their lives.
I would agree with that, and there is that procedure available for folks who are civic-minded. Okay, let's change focus. We've gone from Ron Paul and should prisoners or former prisoners be voting. Let's talk about the Rockville Central blog. Now, in March, there was news that the Rockville Central blog was going to abandon its website for Facebook and publish exclusively on Facebook. And I think that's really interesting. And there was a little follow-up in Friday's Washington Post discussing this. A Pew Research Center reveals that Facebook is joining Google as one of the most influential drivers of traffic to news websites. And then one of the folks with the blogs he said there should be a way for news organizations to figure out other ways to drive value on Facebook other than to say we need Facebook because we need a traffic source. And they said that they saved the $200 annually it costs to maintain the old site. Jeff Jarvis, who is well known to folks who watch Leo Laporte's network, but he is the director of interactive journalism graduate program at the City University of New York. He said that some hyperlocal news sites might follow Rockville's central lead. He said, my dream would be that news sites looked at Facebook not simply to put content on there, but so they can be a better platform for their community. What newspapers should be selling is service. What they should be doing is going to the advertiser and saying, did you know there's this Facebook thing? I'll fix your Facebook page and tweet out your coupons and sell your ads. Some folks say that likes have a value, sometimes placed at $3-4 as opposed to what the benefit you would get from traditional advertising. And then for monetizing traffic, the article describes how they're getting 120,000 views a month, and at the old site they were getting 24,000. So that's a big jump, 6 times more. But it doesn't really compare to the local Gazette newspaper, which gets about 500,000, so about 3 or 4 times what that site gets. Bob, what do you think? My first thought is what this guy Felix said from Rich WP in his manual. He said your own website is your home base, that social networks come and go, and that you really shouldn't be originating content on a social network that could one day be out of vogue, like a la MySpace. But instead, you should, in fact, have your own website that you control completely, and then you aggregate your content out to other places like the old MySpace, Facebook, or that sort of thing. What are your thoughts in general about the notion that someone would originate a blog or news or any kind of content source, originally publish that on Facebook and Facebook alone?
I suspect it would depend on what your target market is. I mean, if you're trying to reach younger people who are like completely comfortable using Facebook for everything, maybe it's a good idea. But I can tell you there's an entire generation of people. Like, I use Facebook, but it's, to get pictures of my grandkids, whatever. I'm personally not interested in every inane thought that people type in there. And that's the problem I see with Facebook, is there's too much chaff you have to go through, for anything worthwhile. And that would not be the first place I looked for something. Now, if your market is, if you're only interested in, like I said, a younger market segment, maybe that's the way to go. But you would have the problem that you mentioned. Is Facebook going to be there forever? I don't know. I personally would go to a company's website first. I find that the most useful.
I would agree.
And I would think that again, if you're trying to reach people who didn't grow up with Facebook, it's going to take a long learning curve before people are comfortable, and that's their natural reaction, is go to Facebook to find something. Okay.
All right, there's another computer topic, because you're a computer nerd on loan from the federal government today, and I'm just sort of an amateur computer nerd. But I'll tell you, this is a really interesting story, and it has business ramifications as well. The Federal Trade Commission probing Google, and there's an article in the Wall Street Journal that I reference in the description of the show. If you look at that, you can, in fact, all the stuff here we've used is described there. But the Federal Trade Commission is what the article says here. A group representing Google critics say Google engages in anti-competitive behavior that harms consumers by restricting the ability of other companies to compete to put their best products and services in front of Internet users, who should be allowed to pick the winners and losers online, not Google. Google got its start by doing a search engine that would rely on how many other websites clicked on a site to judge its relevance, and that was a neat idea, and they quickly took over. So, at first thought, what do you think? What do you think about the whole notion of the feds going after Google?
Well, it's not unprecedented. It's happened, in this country a lot. They went after IBM. They went after AT&T. When a company does have a monopoly position, it is a powerful position for them to be in. Now, Google has become kind of like Kleenex and Jell-O. I mean, Kleenex is a brand name, but everyone thinks of Kleenex as that box of tissues, even though that's a specific company's brand name, but it's become so prevalent that the brand actually takes over the name of the product. I guess like Jell-O. I mean, there's other brands of gelatin, but everyone calls it Jell-O, which is a company's brand name. Google has sort of achieved that, but I think the assumption users had of Google was that it was fair. If it turns out Google is really slanting the results to favor their products, they are in a completely dominant position, and they're not, I guess, an independent source anymore. So that is sort of an anti-competitive, because they could lock other companies out, and they could basically restrict other people getting. Now, I mean, there's always the opportunity to use another search engine, but I think everyone goes to Google first. In fact, everyone calls it, why don't you Google that? I mean, it's become like the Jell-O or the Kleenex. It's now the term. It's become almost a verb, but that's, their company's name. There's other search engines, but everyone says, well, I'm going to Google that and find out whatever. So if they are now doing that, where they're restricting what shows up when you type something in, I was a little actually disturbed to see that, because I assumed I was getting in a fair ranking of, here's my search result, these are the things, in the order that they're the most popular. And I would say that majority of the time I've used Google, I mean, I've looked for some very specific things, like an answer to a very specific error I've had with a computer program, and I found it on Google. I mean, it saves tons and tons of time. But again, the assumption is that it's fair. It's not slanted towards other things that they're trying to sell.
But isn't that the point? To be dominant and to be able to use it. And I want to take this. Let's take this to its logical conclusion. If the feds can go after Google because they use their search engine influence to promote their own products, can I sue Walmart if they choose not to sell my product?
Well, I think within the Walmart case, you have other stores you can go to. They're not restricted.
But they are dominant in certain markets.
Well, they're dominant, but they're still, like the highway that runs right through Manassas, there's Walmart, but there's tons of other stores. You couldn't say that they dominate the market. I have a lot of choices. A company becomes a problem as a monopoly when they've run everybody else out of business. Right now, there's other search engines, but I can't believe most people don't use them. Others have come and go, and they tried to. Even Yahoo at one time was big at first, but I don't think anybody goes and uses that anymore. So
Google has 2/3 of the Google has 2/3 of the U.S. market and 80% of some European markets. So they are clearly dominant, but it's by choice. There's two kinds of monopolies. There's the electric company, which has an electrical cable coming to your house, and then there's the water utility, which there's one water pipe coming, and you can choose to have water or not have water. Now those are clear monopolies. Because the infrastructure cost to install a cable to your house or a pipe to your house is so great that it just doesn't make economic sense for someone to run another set of wires to homes that want electricity from another provider. There's domination sort of monopolies like Costco versus Sam's Club. In Winchester, Virginia, where I used to live, they announced that Sam's Club was coming, but then Costco opened, and so Sam's Club withdrew and just put a super Walmart there because they said whichever one comes first, Sam's or Costco, that they sign up the business members, which are the bulk of their consumers, and that there was no reason to go in there because it didn't make fiscal sense. So Google is in domination, is a dominant search provider because they do things cheaper or for free or do it better than anybody else. But you can use other things. And there aren't many life or death situations that you're relying on it. So I don't see a need from 10,000 feet in the air. I don't know all the specifics of this, and they'll come out in the investigation. But from 10,000 feet in the air, I would say there's a big difference between the kind of government oversight you would expect and want from an electric or water provider who does, in fact, have a monopoly for a must-have product versus a company that's just doing well because they're doing well.
Well, they did go after IBM, and there certainly were plenty. I worked for one of the other companies who provided computers, yet IBM became the dominant computer manufacturer in the marketplace, and they're not really anymore. So, and I think that's partially because of the federal government going after them for anti-monopolistic practices.
Do you think
eventually, now what will happen is somebody will come up with a better Google, and you're kind of right. The marketplace will decide. So right now, there's some smart programmers thinking up something better than Google, and once that comes out, they could easily take away Google's business. So I sort of see your point. I was just surprised that, I always took Google as that's what they were, a search engine, and that's what I used them for. I didn't expect them to be cooking the rankings, basically, is what they're being accused of doing. Once it gets out, that's one thing that could happen. It gets out and people realize, well, I'm not getting a fair search from Google anymore. I'm going to switch search engines. So they could potentially be, doing it to themselves, I guess.
I think a lot of it is mainly companies that are advertising and their products are being are not showing up as high as a Google product. At least that's the allegation. But I think
no. So it's not the search; it's the advertising.
It's a number of things, but I'm leery of whether the federal government should be in the business of saying, okay, you've grown, you're doing everything better than anybody else, and so now you can't use your current market reach, you can't use your current customer base to promote your other products. I'm really scared of that. And I'll give you a perfect example that involves me personally. I'm a newspaper publisher, and I publish 3 newspapers, and one of them is the dominant newspaper in its market. Warren County Report has 9,000 circulation. The other 2 newspapers, the Warren Sentinel has a circulation of about 3,000, and the Northern Virginia Daily has about 4,000 in that county. So we're bigger than those 2 put together. Now, if I opened a hot dog stand and I wanted to, I would think to myself, well, gee, this is cool. I can promote my hot dog stand with an ad in my paper and not have to pay anything because I own the paper. Am I committing a federal antitrust crime?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Because it's a much smaller scale. My newspaper is no Google, but it's the whole thing. It's the dominant way that people can advertise in Warren County, Virginia, and yet people. Would it be wrong for me to put an ad in there?
Why haven't they gone after Microsoft? Why doesn't the government go after Microsoft? They're clearly the dominant company in word processing, spreadsheets, database. Why don't they go after them then? And operating.
Well,
systems?
They did, but they did for years. I mean, Bill Gates was, I think, deposed, but now it's not a big issue because, as you pointed out with IBM, they're not in the dominant position that they were. And I wonder, are they going to go after Apple now and say that because of the dominance in iTunes, or I assume someone's looking into something all the time. It's just, I guess, I want the government. I want them to be aware of what's going on. I question this because it seems to me that, like you said, Google just does it better. And you can go to Yahoo, and I have searched in Yahoo. If I can't find something in Google, sometimes but rarely go to another search engine. I know there were others, I think Lycos and Ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves, yeah.
I don't even know if they exist. I don't know who Jeeves is. I don't know.
And I believe Google has worked. Somehow they've worked to deal with Microsoft, where it's pretty easy to have that show up on your Internet Explorer. Even at the company I work for, they kind of control what's on your computer, but all of our browsers have the Google search box up on the top. So, we could pick anyone we want, or we could choose not to have one on there, but everybody uses a search on a daily basis, and that's the one that shows up. So I think they've become the default standard.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there some responsibility that goes with that? I guess I don't know.
I was talking to a guy at a cable company when I was living in Manassas, and I was arguing about something I forget that I was mad that the cable company had done, And the guy, I said, well, you're a monopoly. And he said, no, we're not. You can always choose not to have cable. It's okay, whatever. All right. Okay, I had a video and I don't have it. I thought I had it, but I screwed up and I don't have it. So I'm just going to talk about this and not do the thing. Produce. This is an interesting thing that, farmers markets and everyone's organic stuff, you see it in grocery stores, you see it at farmers markets. And I know that I know at least one case, but of somebody who sells at a farmer's market, and they get some of the products they get from a wholesaler. Some they grow, some they get from a wholesaler in a fancy plastic thing, and then they remove it, and then they put it in little bags, and then they sell it. They won't lie, but clearly the impression is that they grew this. And people are paying a premium for these things at farmers markets, and also that the whole notion of organically grown versus commercial grown. Back before they had pesticides and things, apples were full of worms and insects, and produce just didn't look as good as it does now. And I eat a lot of fruit. I eat grapes, apples, oranges, love them. And I like that there's no. I don't want to. As my dad jokes, he says, "What's worse than finding a worm in an apple? Finding half a worm." And but I just what do you think? Are you have you gone green in your fridge? Are you organic?
Well, interestingly enough, Manassas has a farmer's market, and I was just at it a couple hours ago, and it opens in April. When you go to the farmer's market in April and you see fruit and vegetables there, I think any normal, halfway intelligent person realizes those weren't grown in Virginia because nothing has grown yet at that point. So you can usually tell what's local, I think, by the price. Like, I happen to like fruit as well, and I'm really fond of peaches, and I wait for this time of year when the local peaches start coming out. And you can tell local versus, and I've actually seen some of the guys at the farmers market, they don't even bother to take stuff out of the box, so you can see, grown in California or Florida or Georgia or whatever. But you can tell when the produce is local because the price is really dropped. I mean, I think I paid like $1.75 a pound for peaches today or something, which is a lot cheaper than you pay in the wintertime when you're getting all the produce from Chile or California or wherever it comes from. So no, I haven't gone organic. I would prefer to have, and I actually read an interesting article about that. If everyone was to go to sustainable organic produce, we couldn't produce even half, because of the land required and everything, half of what the United States needed. If everyone did that, the production would drop to the point where we couldn't even feed this country. So there's a reason, and the fact that you can go to the store and find a wide variety of products the way you find them now. When I was younger, and anyone who's, I'm in my 50s, anyone who grew up in the 50s or 60s, in the wintertime when we went to the store, you didn't find all that fruit. That was kind of a summer thing because they didn't have cost-effective means. I mean, they would have to be trucked back then, and they didn't have the technology to keep things fresh like they do now. So we get, our stores are filled with things that came from South America in the wintertime. They taste okay. They got them here. I mean, that never happened. So technology has improved it to the point where you can have that kind of stuff year-round. To me, that's a better state than just having what the local farmers grow for that specific month or 2 months throughout the year. If I can't believe that's what people want, but if they do,
we are spoiled. Yeah,
give up. Right. I mean, we have in this country such a wealth of choices, and if you've done any traveling to other countries, they don't have those choices. So that's kind of what capitalism brings you, the fact that all these different vendors at the farmers market today are out there trying to sell their various fruits and vegetables, and they're trying to undercut the guy next to them. And whichever guy is the most successful, that's the one who's going to succeed.
Okay.
But I like having all those choices, and you can believe half of whatever you read, but if it sounds plausible when you read it, the way that sustainable organic farming is done, we don't have enough land in this country dedicated to farming to produce even half of the amount of produce that this country consumes, much less during this time of year tries to ship to other countries.
On that same topic, I remember I was discussing with an oil expert why gas prices were so high about, I don't know, a year or 2 years ago. And he said that it's because that China and India were using more oil or more energy than the world used 10 years prior. But he said that one of the things, ethanol, everyone was freaked out, E85 and all this stuff. And we look at other countries like Brazil that can grow sugarcane, which is much more efficient than corn, ethanol, as far as like how much sugarcane it takes to make a certain volume of ethanol versus how much corn it takes. He said in order to power our cars with ethanol, we would have to plant virtually the entire landmass of the United States with corn. And so that's just, that's not practical. Okay, let me real quick. I just want to go on this. This is interesting, and it goes back to I forget. I don't know if it was Google, whatever company that was through creative accounting shipping all their profits overseas. And then here I see on Drudge Report, I see angry protests disrupt U2 concert because apparently they were not paying their fair share of taxes, according to some news reports. And that's a whole thing. I'm just curious, real quick, on that topic, on these companies having offshore entities that might be one or two people in an office, but this giant business is technically based there so that they can keep their profits and they just hold them overseas and they don't have to pay taxes on them. And some folks will rant and say, well, they're screwing the American government out of its tax revenue. Another point is they have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. If there's any kind of legal means to increase profit, then they should do that, or they could be, I guess, charged with malpractice. What do you think, Bob?
I would think if the country had a fairer, simpler tax code, companies wouldn't go to all that trouble to try and avoid paying taxes, because there's a cost in doing that as well. I mean, it costs something to have these things set up overseas, and if the tax rate itself was fair, everyone should pay their fair share, but I don't think the tax rates now, I mean, they're set up to favor one group over another. They're not set up to be fair. And you can hear people argue whether a flat tax is fair or whatever, but you're right, a corporation doesn't actually pay taxes. All they do is collect it. I mean, it's in the cost of the product you buy. So if you want to, it's always easy, companies are nameless and faceless. They're just companies. Keep raising their taxes, and that's a cheap, quick source of revenue. Well, it's not, because companies do have a duty to pay the least amount of taxes as possible, because they have shareholders who buy their stock because they want the profit or the return. Otherwise, they're not going to buy their stock. So I agree that a company has a fiduciary responsibility to do that. And since I'm involved in the finance area of my company, I personally look for every way I can to save on and costs and expenses, and I would do that. But again, there is a cost of having an overseas operation. So if the tax rate is dropped to the point where that no longer makes financial sense, I think the companies would stop doing it and then just pay whatever the taxes are.
Okay, and then I'm going to switch gears here and make one more point on that. When I was doing my show prep, I looked at a video of an interview with Charles Rangel, and it was on C-SPAN, and they asked him about his ethical issues, and he spoke for about 3 minutes on it, and he began by saying that the tax code was too complicated. And this is the former chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee who writes the tax code.
Right.
So I thought, okay, he's
right,
but still.
Thing that saw sweeping the internet was people are calling for an amendment that Congress can pass no law that doesn't apply to them. In other words, they're not the health care legislation they just passed. They're exempt from that. They're exempt from all kinds of laws. So if they were, if they did have to abide by these laws that they pass, especially tax laws and things like that, they might think twice before voting on some of these. But they have really set themselves up as a privileged class where they're above the law, basically. And I think that's just the attitude they have, and Charlie Rangel is a good example of that. Well, the tax code's too complicated. I made a mistake. Oh, wait a minute. You wrote that tax code, or you were involved in it, so you should hold some responsibility. So if there's some punishment involved, you should fairly accept it.
I mean, he's right, though. It is too complicated. But
that you could go on for hours.
Yeah.
Congress and tax codes.
He'd be a great guest. I'd love to have him on. Okay,
right.
let's. I'm going to do my 2 rants. First of all, my rant. I got a really good one against Radio Shack. I'm going to do a rant against the Wall Street Journal. I'm on their page. I'm doing my show prep, and I'm looking at this story that I linked to. Feds to launch probe of Google, and it's a couple screens down, and then it says printer-friendly version because I want to print it so I can highlight things. And had I not had a couple technical glitches and a long phone call with your wife, my sister, then I would have highlighted more of this stuff. But anyway, this is the printer-friendly version. Now, this is ridiculous. It's got up here you've got an ad for American Express. Okay, that's fine. And then all their copyright stuff. Then their logo. And then the title. And the here it says technology and the date. And then the text here. Then you've got a picture. And then another picture with a caption. And then page 2, another picture and more text. All the columns are double spaced. Big spaces in between each paragraph. Then here you've got more. You've got hyperlinks to other stories which are useless on a print. And then another page of text. Okay, this is good. And then down here, and then a bunch of copyrights, to order reprints. This is ridiculous. So a printer-friendly version means less ink and an ability to, print the text for whatever reason. This is 4 pages. If I had just straight up clicked print to print the whole website, all the sidebar crap, everything, that would have been about another page. So shame on the Wall Street Journal for not having a good print me button. But that's mild. Radio Shack, I got fairly steamed at yesterday. I'm going to show this. I bought a mono cable because I've got this, it's called an IFP. Let me grab it. I got a technical issue. I've got this thing. You see, I've got these black headphones on. And I've got, it's an interruptible feedback monitor. All it is a single ear thing. And this is what they use. And this it's got a clip here. It comes back here. And I had this on before a couple shows ago. And then this thing comes over your ear and goes in here. And it's kind of clear and you can't really see it on. But it's mono. And so I talked to the folks at Auto Engineering, and we can't figure out why this doesn't work, but the stereo one does. So in an attempt to fix it, I got a mono cable from Radio Shack, for which I paid $5 and something. And then I went back to return it because I decided it didn't work, and so I wanted to get the stereo one so I could use it for my stereo headphones. So I go into Radio Shack, and I have it repackaged, right? It's all looped fine. It's back in the original packaging, and Radio Shack makes their stuff so you can do this. So you can open it up, try it, doesn't work, and you can return it. And I have my receipt in my hand, and I said I want to exchange the mono cable for the 6-foot mono for the 8-foot stereo. It's going to cost me like $3 more. Here's my credit card. So I got the new one, and the guy comes up. He says, "What's your phone number?" So I'm like, okay, give him my phone number. And then he says, "What's your home address?" I said, "What? Why do you need my home address?" "I'm not telling you my home address. It's not relevant. I'm not giving you that." And he said, we have to do it to do a return. I said, "Does it say that on the receipt?" And then I look on the receipt. Your name, address, and the original sales receipt are required for all refunds. Right on the receipt. And so I said, "I'm not telling you. It's none of your business." And he did it because I said it's not a refund anyway. It's an exchange of a resaleable brand new product with receipt. And I bought the thing 3 hours ago, and I just want to give you more money to get a better one. And so the guy was, whatever, I guess, flustered. But my whole thing is, I'll be damned if I'm going to give Radio Shack my home address so they can put it in their hackable cloud when I'm just trying to spend more money with them. So screw Radio Shack for doing this. I mean, it's overpriced crap anyway. But I use them when I have to. But
they've got a long history of that.
Yeah,
remember when you used to go in there to buy batteries when you had to go there and you were paying cash and you still had to give them your phone number? And I go, "What do you need that for? I'm paying cash."
Well, okay, I'm for the phone number if they put it in the computer if you're buying something, and then if you lose your receipt, it used to be this. It used to be they would sell it to you, and they'd put your phone number in there, and they told me, they said, well, if you don't have your receipt, then when you come back, you give us your phone number, we can find the purchase, and we can refund your money or exchange it, that sort of thing.
But they also want your address, then you start getting those mailers once a week from them, and now that there's the internet, obviously they want your email address so they can send you stuff. But it used to be they wanted your address so that they could send you advertising in the mail.
Yeah, so screw Radio Shack for wanting my personal information in their hackable.
Your Blog Talk Radio page actually has an ad for Google on it right now.
Oh, it's see, they're smart because in the show description it says what we're talking about. It also shows so Kelly's still logged in.
The Google toolbar ad just came up on there.
Well, I just lost you pretty bad. Go ahead again.
No, I said as your blog webpage, the Google toolbar ad just came up on it.
That's funny. Okay, Bob, you're breaking up pretty bad. I don't know if you shifted something or if you're on a cordless and you've got your.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not on a cordless. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. He's on a good old-fashioned POTS landline. So anyway, and if anyone listening or watching to the live or the recorded thing can figure out how I can make this thing work with Wirecast, I would appreciate it because I like it and I can't make it work. So anyway, okay. So in summary, shame on the non-green print me button for the Wall Street Journal. And
just as an aside on that, if I find something on a web page that I really want, I cut and paste it into Word and then delete all the ads and everything, so I just have the text or the pictures or whatever. If it's something I really want later on, I get rid of all of it. But it's a lot of extra steps to do that. I agree with that. Printing a web page never looks right.
But I'm cool with that, and that's what I did. See, the Wall Street Journal one I did, and then I looked at it because it did at least show it to me before, so I had to make a decision. And the only reason I printed it was to show how absurd one article with all this crap, especially the hyperlinks. Why do you need to put the hyperlinks? I mean, am I supposed to jab the paper and it prints more paper? This is ridiculous. I could see if it was an HP-owned thing because then they're going to make their money on the ink, but that's what I did with the Google story. I actually copied it and pasted it, and then at the bottom, it's in a little slightly smaller font, the last line here, because I wanted to fit it on one page, right? To be green for the episode, since we were going to talk about the farmers market, I had to be green. And for the record, all three of my papers are printed in the United States on 100% recycled paper with soy-based ink. So there.
There you go.
And just and Bob, of course, is a race car driver, so he gets 1 mile to the gallon. So he's not going to get into the whole green conversation, I guess.
Got that right.
All right, Bob Harman from Manassas, Virginia. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Let's do a plug for the racetrack if folks want to check that out. What do they do? Where do they go?
Old Dominion Speedway in Manassas, Virginia. It's actually one of the oldest NASCAR tracks in the country. It's been in operation around 55 years. They run drag races on Friday nights and late model stock car NASCAR on Saturday nights, starting usually around 7 o'clock. I'm not racing tonight, but I think I'm going to take my grandson to go watch. Okay, awesome. I'm hitting the wrong button. I'm getting all these weird things in my ear. Okay, so that concludes our hour, and I really want to thank Bob, and thanks for Kelly for coaxing my brother-in-law Bob into doing this. Bob's a great guest, and now that we've got the technical glitches, I hope he had a good time. This show is broadcast. Yeah, sure. Thanks. It's every day, broadcast on Ustream.tv live, and it's on Blog Talk Radio Live, 3 p.m. Eastern Time every single day, and then we put it on YouTube. And put the episodes up there. So I'll have links. If you're watching this or listening to it, next to the description, I'll have links to all three channels. So you're welcome to hang out with us live or watch it later. And we love feedback, and especially if you can figure out how to make this funny-looking thing work.
and tell Radio Shack, hell no, you're not getting my personal information for your hackable data cloud. Say that to them, and they'll be so flustered that the kid won't know what you're talking about, and we'll give you the exchange, which is exactly what happened to me. So again, thanks to Bob, and we appreciate you watching. I'm Dan McDermott, and I will see or hear you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern.